Imagine a civilization so advanced, so sophisticated, that they built sprawling palaces with intricate plumbing systems, vibrant frescoes that tell stories without words, and a society where women held positions of power. All this over 3,000 years ago. Now picture that same civilization vanishing almost overnight, leaving behind only whispers in the ruins. This is the mystery of the Minoans, a people who thrived on the island of Crete during the Bronze Age, only to disappear so completely that their very name was lost to history until archaeologists stumbled upon their legacy centuries later. What happened to them? Why did their grand palaces crumble? And what secrets do their silent walls still hold? The Minoans were the first great civilization of Europe, a beacon of art, trade, and innovation in a world still finding its footing. They worshipped goddesses in sacred caves, navigated the Mediterranean with skill that rivaled their neighbors, and created a writing system we still struggle to decipher. But despite their brilliance, their story is shadowed by unanswered questions. Was it a cataclysmic volcanic eruption that brought them down, an invasion by foreign forces? Or something even more unsettling? The truth is, we still don't know, and that's what makes their legacy so endlessly fascinating. Today, we're diving deep into 30 of the most mysterious secrets of the Minoan civilization, secrets that challenge what we think we know about ancient history. From the labyrinthine halls of Knossos to the enigmatic Phaistos Disc, from their sudden collapse to the eerie parallels with the myth of Atlantis, we'll explore the clues hidden in their artifacts, their architecture, and even their bones. This isn't just a journey into the past, it's a detective story, one where every fragment of pottery, every faded mural, could hold the key to unraveling a mystery thousands of years in the making. So, are you ready to step into the shadows of history and uncover what the Minoans left behind? Let's begin. Where did the Minoans come from? This question has puzzled historians and archaeologists for over a century. Unlike other ancient civilizations that left behind records of their origins, the Minoans seem to have emerged from the shadows of prehistory, fully formed, with no clear story of how they arrived on Crete. Even their name is a modern invention, borrowed from the legendary King Minos, because their true name, their own word for themselves, is lost to time. One theory suggests they may have migrated from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, bringing with them early farming techniques that allowed their society to flourish. Pottery styles, architectural designs, and even genetic studies hint at possible links to these eastern neighbors. But then there's another twist. Some scholars point to evidence of trade with Egypt, where Minoan-style frescoes and artifacts have been found in pharaohs' tombs, raising the possibility of an even wider cultural network. Perhaps the most tantalizing mystery is the Minoan writing system. Their earliest script, known as Linear A, remains undeciphered, locking away secrets that could reveal where they came from and how they saw themselves. What little we do know comes from later Mycenaean Greeks, who adapted Minoan symbols into their own writing. Linear B, yet another layer in this unsolved puzzle. And then there's the legend of Atlantis. Some researchers speculate that the Minoans could have inspired Plato's tale of a great island civilization swallowed by the sea. Could their sudden decline have been twisted into myth over centuries? The connections are speculative, but the idea lingers because when it comes to the Minoans, every clue feels like a piece of a vast, unfinished story. The legend of King Minos and the Minotaur isn't just a thrilling tale of monsters and heroes. It might hold hidden truths about the Minoan civilization itself. At the heart of the myth lies the labyrinth, a maze so complex that anyone who entered would be lost forever, doomed to face the half-man, half-bull creature lurking within. But what if this story wasn't pure fantasy? What if it was a distorted memory of something real? The sprawling palace of Knossos, with its winding corridors and countless rooms, could easily have inspired the idea of a labyrinth. Archaeologists who first uncovered the ruins remarked how easy it would be to lose your way in its intricate layout. Even the name labyrinth might trace back to the Minoans. Some scholars believe it derives from labris, a double-headed axe central to their religious symbolism, found carved into palace walls and frescoes. Could ancient visitors to Knossos have mistaken this grand, confusing structure for a literal maze? Then there's the Minotaur. Bulls were sacred to the Minoans, appearing everywhere from their art to their rituals. Frescoes show young men and women leaping over bulls in what seems to be a dangerous ceremonial sport. Some historians speculate that the Minotaur myth could stem from these practices, perhaps a memory of masked priests performing bull dances, their costumes blending human and animal features. Or maybe it reflects a darker truth. Rumors of human sacrifice found in Minoan ruins have led some to wonder if the monster was symbolic of a grim ritual tradition. King Minos himself adds another layer of mystery. Greek myths paint him as a powerful ruler, but was he a real historical figure? Some argue he could have been a title like pharaoh, passed down through generations of Minoan leaders. Others suggest the stories blend fact and fiction, memories of Crete's dominance over the Aegean, twisted over centuries into tales of a tyrannical king demanding tributes of young Athenians. The most fascinating possibility, that the legend preserves a fragment of political upheaval. The Minoans' decline coincided with the rise of Mycenaean Greece, and the myth's ending where the Greek hero Theseus slays the Minotaur might symbolize their conquest. Every layer of this story feels like a puzzle, where myth and history intertwine so tightly that separating them may be impossible. And that's the magic of the Minoans. Even their monsters refuse to stay confined to legend. The Palace of Knossos isn't just a ruin, it's a riddle. Step inside its corridors and you're met with walls painted in vivid blues and reds, staircases that twist unexpectedly, and rooms layered upon rooms in a design so complex it defies easy explanation. Was this the heart of Minoan political power, a sacred temple, or something even stranger? The answer might be all of the above. Unlike later palaces, which clearly separated royal living quarters from public spaces, Knossos blurs the lines between the two. Grand courtyards sit beside small shrines, storage rooms overflow with giant clay jars near elaborately decorated chambers, and everywhere the symbol of the double-headed axe, the labris, hints at rituals woven into daily life. This wasn't just a building, it was a living, breathing center of culture. Advanced plumbing systems with terracotta pipes designed to carry fresh water and whisk away waste suggest an engineering prowess unmatched in Europe at the time. Light wells built into the structure funneled sunlight deep into the palace, while frescoes of leaping dolphins and processions of offering bearers covered the walls, turning stone and plaster into a canvas of movement and life. But it's the very layout of Knossos that sparks the most debate. The palace lacks clear defensive walls, a detail that sets it apart from contemporary fortresses in Mesopotamia or Egypt. Instead, its sprawling, multi-level design, with corridors that double back and rooms stacked asymmetrically, suggests a space designed not for protection but for ceremony. Some scholars argue the labyrinthine feel was intentional, meant to disorient visitors as part of sacred rites. Others propose a practical explanation. The palace grew organically over centuries, with each generation adding new sections like layers of a living organism. Then there's the eerie possibility that Knossos wasn't primarily a palace at all. The abundance of religious artifacts, altars, sacred horns, and figurines of serpent-wielding goddesses has led some to speculate it functioned more as a temple complex where rulers also served as high priests. And what of the throne room? Its lone stone seat, flanked by frescoes of griffins, feels oddly intimate for a space often called the oldest throne room in Europe. Was this where a priest-king held court, or where oracles spoke in trances? The questions multiply with every excavated corner. Even the storied Prince of the Lilies fresco, once thought to depict a Minoan ruler, might not show a prince at all. Recent restorations suggest the figure could be a priestess or even a deity. The deeper you look, the more Knossos resist simple categorization. It's as if the Minoans designed their grandest structure to be both a monument and a mirror, reflecting back whatever theories we project onto it. Maybe that's the greatest secret of all. In a civilization that left no deciphered records, their architecture becomes their voice. And at Knossos, that voice is still speaking, if only we could fully understand what it's saying. Walking through the ruins of Knossos, you might stumble upon something easily overlooked. A network of narrow channels carved into the stone, or fragments of terracotta pipes neatly fitted together. These aren't mere architectural quirks, they're remnants of a plumbing system so advanced it wouldn't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years. While other Bronze Age civilizations relied on wells and communal water sources, the Minoans engineered a solution that brought fresh water directly into their palaces and whisked away waste with startling efficiency. The secret lay in their understanding of gravity and gradient. Their terracotta pipes, shaped like interlocking segments, were carefully angled to ensure a steady flow of water from natural springs into the heart of Knossos. Some sections even featured sedimentation tanks, where impurities would settle before the water continued its journey, a primitive filtration system that speaks to their grasp of hygiene. But it's the drainage that truly astonishes. Rainwater collected from courtyards and rooftops was channeled through a labyrinth of underground conduits, preventing flooding even during heavy storms. What's even more remarkable is how they maintained these systems. Access points built into the palace walls allowed for regular cleaning and repairs, proving this wasn't just a one-time feat of engineering but a sustained priority. Compare this to contemporaries like the Egyptians or Mesopotamians, whose grandiose monuments often lacked basic sanitation, and the Minoans stand apart as pioneers of practical innovation. Then there's the mystery of how they conceived these ideas. Some speculate trade with Egypt exposed them to early hydraulic experiments, but the Minoans improved upon them dramatically. Others suggest their island environment demanded creativity. Limited freshwater sources and seasonal rains may have spurred inventions to conserve every drop. Perhaps the most haunting question is why this knowledge vanished with them. When later Greeks built their cities, they reverted to simpler wells and cisterns. It's as if the Minoans' expertise became a forgotten legend, another thread in the enigma of a civilization far ahead of its time, leaving behind silent pipes as clues to their brilliance. Among the tantalizing mysteries the Minoans left behind, none is more frustrating or potentially revealing than their undeciphered script known as Linear A. Etched onto clay tablets, painted on storage jars, and pressed into seals, these cryptic symbols represent the only surviving written records of their language. And yet, despite over a century of effort by linguists and archaeologists, their meaning remains locked away, a linguistic puzzle that could rewrite our understanding of this ancient civilization. What makes Linear so elusive, unlike its successor, Linear B, which was deciphered in the 1950s as an early form of Greek Linear, shows no clear ties to any known language family. The symbols themselves are elegant, a mix of stylized figures and abstract lines, but their purpose is hotly debated. Some tablets appear to be inventories, listing commodities like grain, oil, and figs. Others hint at religious offerings or administrative records, with recurring sequences that might be names of deities or places. But without a bilingual text like the Rosetta Stone that unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs, every attempt at translation has hit a wall. The very structure of the script adds to the challenge. Linear contains around 90 distinct signs, some representing syllables, others possibly whole words or numbers. But the grammar, that's where theories collide. Some linguists argue it belongs to the Aegean language group, a lost branch unrelated to Indo-European or Semitic languages. Others propose links to ancient Anatolian tongues, pointing to shared symbols with scripts found in Turkey. And then there's the fringe theory that linear encodes a Proto-Etruscan language, a ghostly precursor to the civilization that would later flourish in Italy. The stakes of cracking this code couldn't be higher. If deciphered, linear could reveal everything from the names of Minoan rulers to their religious hymns, trade agreements, or even personal letters, voices from the deep past suddenly audible again. Imagine learning how they referred to themselves rather than the Greek-imposed name Minoan, or uncovering their own version of history free from the biases of later cultures. Recent breakthroughs offer glimmers of hope. Artificial intelligence has been deployed to analyze symbol patterns, searching for hidden grammatical rules. Meanwhile, discoveries of new tablets, some in underwater ruins off Crete, provide fresh material for comparison, yet the script guards its secrets fiercely. Some researchers quietly admit that without a stroke of luck, a bilingual inscription buried in untouched ruins, perhaps linear, may remain silent forever. And so, these etched clay fragments sit at the heart of a paradox. The more we study them, the more they remind us how much we don't know. Every line and curve is a whisper from a civilization that mastered art, engineering, and trade, yet left their own story just out of reach. It's as if the Minoans designed their script not just to record but to mystify, a final labyrinth with no promise of an exit. Far out in the Aegean Sea, around the year 1600 BCE, the island of Thera, modern Santorini, exploded with a force that makes modern volcanoes look like firecrackers. This wasn't just an eruption, it was a cataclysm. Scientists estimate it released energy equivalent to hundreds of atomic bombs, sending plumes of ash 20 miles into the sky and triggering tsunamis that may have slammed into Crete's northern coast with waves over 30 feet high. But here's the mystery: was this event the death knell for the Minoans, or merely a setback they could have survived? The case for catastrophe is compelling. Ash layers dug up across the eastern Mediterranean match Thera's volcanic signature, proving its fallout reached Egypt and Anatolia. On Crete, archaeologists have found tsunami debris, chunks of coral and seashells hurled inland mixed with collapsed walls at coastal sites like Knossos, a key Minoan port. Then there's the climatic aftermath. Tree rings from Ireland to California show abnormal growth patterns around this time, hinting at years of colder temperatures and failed harvests, a death sentence for a trade-dependent society like the Minoans. But counterarguments abound. Knossos and other major palaces show no direct evidence of quake damage from the eruption. Some sites were rebuilt afterward, suggesting resilience. The timeline's also fuzzy. Thera likely erupted decades before the Minoans' final decline, meaning other factors, like Mycenaean invasions or internal unrest, could have delivered the final blows. Then there's the intriguing middle ground. Maybe Thera didn't destroy the Minoans outright but shattered their aura of invincibility. Imagine the psychological impact: temples buried in ash, coastal villages wiped out by waves, the sun blotted out for weeks. Such trauma could have destabilized their theocratic rule, making them vulnerable to rivals. Or consider trade, the Minoans' lifeblood. With ports damaged and shipping routes disrupted, their economy may have unraveled slowly, like a thread pulled from a fresco. The most haunting clue comes from Akrotiri, a Minoan-style town on Thera itself. Buried under volcanic pumice, its vivid frescoes and multi-story buildings were preserved almost intact, a snapshot of a society frozen mid-breath. Yet no bodies have been found there, suggesting the inhabitants fled. Did they warn Crete? Did anyone listen? The silence is deafening. Perhaps the truth lies in the soil. Recent excavations at Palakastro on Crete's eastern coast reveal a layer of tsunami debris, but directly above it, evidence of swift rebuilding. This paints a picture of a civilization that weathered disaster, only to collapse later from compounded pressures. Thera's eruption might not have been the single knife to the heart of Minoan culture, but the first wound in a series that slowly bled them dry. In the end, Thera's legacy is a lesson in humility. Even today, with satellites and seismographs, we struggle to untangle nature's role in history's turning points. The Minoans, masters of art, engineering, and the sea, had no way to predict or prepare for such fury. Their story whispers a warning: civilizations, no matter how brilliant, are always at the mercy of the earth beneath them. The vibrant colors of Minoan art leap across the centuries: saffron yellow dancers mid-twirl, cerulean dolphins frozen in motion, rich reds bleeding from frescoes that feel startlingly alive. This isn't just decoration, it's a language without words, a window into how the Minoans saw their world. Unlike the rigid, formal art of Egypt or Mesopotamia, Minoan creations pulse with fluidity and movement. Figures bend and twist, their garments fluttering as if caught in an eternal breeze. Even their pottery, painted with octopuses whose tentacles embrace entire jars, seems to reject straight lines in favor of swirling, organic forms. What does this tell us? Perhaps that the Minoans worshipped nature's rhythms. The sea's ebb and flow, the coiled energy of a bull in motion, more than they revered human-made order. Take the famous bull-leaping fresco from Knossos. 3 figures, 2 fair-skinned, 1 darker arch over a charging bull in what might be a ritual or sport. The bull's power is palpable, its muscles straining, yet the human figures appear almost weightless, defying gravity. Some scholars argue this depicts an actual ceremony where young athletes vaulted over bulls to prove courage or please the gods. Others see it as pure symbolism, the bull representing untamed nature, the leaper's humanity's attempt to harness it. The gender ambiguity adds another layer. Are those lithe figures men or women? Minoan art blurs such distinctions often, suggesting a society where roles weren't rigidly divided. Then there's the sacred symbolism. Serpents coil around bare-armed goddesses in faience figurines, their exposed breasts signaling fertility, while the snakes hint at chthonic power, earthly wisdom coiled beneath the surface. Floral motifs burst from every medium: lilies, crocuses, and papyrus, possibly tied to rituals involving saffron or opium. Even the recurring horns of consecration, those stylized bull horns crowning altars and rooftops, might represent duality: moon and sun, life and death, a balance central to Minoan spirituality. Their color palette alone speaks volumes. Deep blues made from imported lapis lazuli, vibrant reds from crushed minerals. These weren't just aesthetic choices but displays of wealth and connectivity. The famous saffron gatherer fresco, with its blue monkey plucking flowers, might depict a ritual linked to the precious spice, a commodity so valuable it warranted divine imagery. Most intriguing are the absences. Unlike their contemporaries, the Minoans rarely depicted warfare or conquest. No triumphant kings smiting enemies, no scenes of siege or slavery. Instead, processions of offering bearers, gatherings under sacred trees, and communal dances dominate. Was this a genuinely peaceful society, or did they simply choose not to immortalize conflict? The answer may lie in their most enigmatic art of all, the camp stool fresco, where figures sit in conversation, their hands animated, their faces eerily modern. In that moment, frozen in plaster, the Minoans feel closest to us, not as distant mysteries, but as people who believed art should capture life, not dominate it. The image is iconic: 3 figures suspended in mid-air, limbs outstretched, their bodies curving over the back of a charging bull. This is the bull-leaping fresco from Knossos, a masterpiece of Minoan art that has ignited debates for generations. Was this a sacred rite, a deadly sport, or something even more profound? The answer might lie in the details most viewers miss. Notice how the bull's body is elongated, almost stretched beyond natural proportions, while the human figures seem weightless, defying physics. This isn't realism, it's symbolism in motion. Some scholars argue the fresco depicts an actual ritual, a test of courage where young athletes, perhaps initiates into a religious order, vaulted over bulls to prove their worth. Bones found at Minoan sites show injuries consistent with such dangerous feats, including fractures and spinal damage. But why bulls were sacred in Minoan culture, their horns adorning altars and their imagery woven into religious art? Leaping over one might have been a way to harness its power, to commune with the divine through sheer physical daring. Then there's the sporting angle. Imagine the roar of a crowd as performers somersaulted over bulls in a packed courtyard, their success met with cheers, their failures with gasps. Similar traditions survive today in parts of Spain and France, where bull leaping echoes ancient rites. Yet the Minoan version feels distinct, less about spectacle, more about meaning. The fresco's composition, with its repeating patterns and rhythmic flow, suggests a ceremony choreographed like a dance, each movement laden with spiritual significance. Look closer at the figures themselves. Their androgynous features, slender waists, flowing hair, blurred gender lines, hinting that both men and women may have participated. This aligns with other Minoan art, where women are often shown in active roles, from leading processions to handling snakes. Was bull leaping a rare arena where gender mattered less than skill? But the most tantalizing theory ties the practice to the labyrinth myth. If the bull symbolized the Minotaur, then leaping over it could represent conquering chaos, mastering the beast within. The fresco's circular motion, bull charging, leapers soaring, mirrors the labyrinth's twisting paths, a physical metaphor for the spiritual journey. Of course, not everyone agrees. Skeptics point out that no contemporary texts describe the practice, leaving us to interpret silent images. Could this be artistic license, a metaphor for something entirely different? Without the Minoan's own words, we're left reading between the lines, chasing meaning through brushstrokes frozen in time. One thing is certain, the bull-leaping fresco isn't just art. It's a puzzle, a prayer, and a dare, an invitation to leap, like those ancient figures, into the unknown. Whether ritual or sport, its power endures, a testament to a civilization that revered the bull not just as an animal, but as a bridge between earth and the divine. In a world where most ancient civilizations placed men firmly at the center of power, the Minoans stand out like a burst of color on a faded fresco. Their art teems with women, bare-breasted goddesses holding snakes, priestesses presiding over ceremonies, female figures leading processions with an unmistakable air of authority. This isn't just artistic preference, it's a cultural statement. While contemporaneous societies like Egypt or Mesopotamia relegated women to supporting roles, Minoan women appear front and center, their prominence etched into every medium from gold rings to towering frescoes. But what exactly was their place in society? Were they sacred symbols, political leaders, or something more fluid? Consider the famous snake goddess figurines striking clay statues of women gripping serpents, their elaborate bodices bearing their chests, their eyes piercing even across millennia. Found in temple repositories and palace shrines, these weren't mere decorations. The snakes, symbols of regenerative power in many ancient cultures, suggest these women wielded spiritual authority, perhaps as intermediaries between mortals and deities. Then there's the grandstand fresco at Knossos, where crowds of women sit in tiers of seating, watching an event, possibly a ritual or ceremony, with men standing at the periphery. The composition alone hints at a social hierarchy that flips expectations on their head. But power takes many forms. Some scholars argue that Minoan women's prominence was largely religious, confined to the sphere of goddess worship. The island's many depictions of nature deities, often female, support this, showing women as keepers of sacred knowledge rather than secular rulers. Yet others point to artifacts like the chieftain cup, where a woman stands receiving offerings from a male figure, her larger size, a common artistic convention denoting importance, suggesting political clout. Could Crete have been home to a matrilineal system, where lineage and inheritance flowed through mothers and daughters? The evidence grows even more intriguing when we examine burial practices. In the cemetery at Phaoni, high-status tombs contain women buried with gold diadems, intricate jewelry, and seals that may have denoted administrative roles, artifacts typically associated with leadership in other Bronze Age cultures. Meanwhile, frescoes at Akrotiri on Thera, a Minoan-influenced settlement, show women engaged in what appears to be a coming-of-age rite, their central role in the ritual implying societal authority beyond the temple walls. Then there's the enigma of Ariadne. Greek myth paints her as King Minos' daughter, the guiding thread in Theseus' escape from the labyrinth. But some historians speculate this story preserves a distorted memory of real Minoan princesses who held tangible power, whether as royal advisors, priestess queens, or even co-rulers. The truth may lie somewhere in the middle, a society where gender roles were less rigid than in neighboring cultures, where women could ascend to prominence through both sacred and secular avenues. What's undeniable is how radically this contrasts with later Mycenaean Greece, where patriarchal structures dominated. When the Mycenaeans conquered Crete, they absorbed Minoan art and technology, but not, it seems, their gender norms. The shift is visible in later frescoes, where women retreat to the background, their once central roles diminished. This divergence makes the Minoans even more extraordinary, a civilization that, for a fleeting moment in history, envisioned a world where power wasn't inherently masculine. Whether as priestesses, rulers, or both, their legacy challenges our assumptions about antiquity, proving that the past was far more varied and far more fascinating than we often assume. Among the most mesmerizing artifacts unearthed from Minoan ruins are the enigmatic snake goddess figurines striking ceramic statues of women clutching serpents, their elaborate tiered skirts flaring outward, their exposed breasts symbolizing fertility, their faces radiating an otherworldly calm. Discovered in the early 20th century within the sacred repositories of Knossos, these figurines immediately sparked debate. Were they depictions of a supreme deity, representations of priestesses, or perhaps something far more abstract? The truth may be woven from all these threads. First, consider the serpents themselves. Coiled around the figure's arms and bodies, the snakes are no mere decorative choice. Across ancient cultures, from the Mesopotamian goddess Ningishida to the Hindu Kundalini, serpents symbolized regeneration, healing, and the cyclical nature of life and death. Their shedding of skin mirrored the rhythms of agriculture so vital to Crete's survival. The Minoans, deeply attuned to natural forces, likely saw them as conduits between the earthly and divine. The way these snakes are handled, grasped firmly yet without tension, suggests a ritual familiarity, as if the figures are intermediaries channeling raw cosmic power. But who exactly do they portray? The prevailing theory casts them as manifestations of a mother goddess, a primal figure linked to fertility and the land's bounty. This aligns with the figurines' discovery near altars and storerooms filled with offerings, yet details complicate this view. Some statues depict younger women with slender frames, others mature figures with fuller forms, hinting at a pantheon of goddesses representing different life stages. The famous Boston snake goddess, with her commanding stance and piercing, wide-set eyes, exudes sovereignty, while the more delicate Heraclean goddess seems almost contemplative. Could these variations reflect distinct deities or perhaps different aspects of a single, multifaceted divinity? Then there's the priestess theory. Unlike Egyptian or Mesopotamian art, where gods and mortals are clearly distinguished, Minoan iconography blurs these lines. Frescoes show women often bare-breasted and adorned in identical tiered skirts, participating in rituals, gathering saffron, or dancing in sacred groves. The snake goddess figurines might not depict a goddess at all, but human officiants embodying divine power during ceremonies. The snakes in this reading could be ritual props wielded to invoke healing or protection. Supporting this, archaeologists have found snake-tubed ceramic vessels with serpentine appliques that may have housed real snakes during rites. The clothing offers another clue. The figurines' flounced skirts and tight bodices mirror outfits seen in frescoes of ceremonial processions. These weren't everyday wear but sacred vestments, possibly reserved for rites tied to agricultural cycles or initiation rituals. The exposed breasts, far from being erotic, likely symbolized nourishment and life-giving power, a motif seen in Neolithic fertility figures across Europe. Most intriguing is the possibility that these figurines served a dual purpose, both divine effigy and ritual object. Some have hollow interiors, suggesting they could hold liquids or small offerings. Others show wear patterns indicating frequent handling, as if passed among worshippers during ceremonies. Imagine a priestess lifting one aloft, the glazed snakes catching flickering torchlight, their undulating forms seeming to move as shadows danced across the temple walls. In that moment, the boundary between human and deity would dissolve entirely. What's haunting is how little we truly know. Without written records explaining their purpose, the snake goddess figurines remain open to interpretation, symbols of a spirituality that valued fluidity over rigid dogma. They challenge us to reconsider how the Minoans viewed the sacred, not as distant gods to be appeased, but as forces woven intimately into daily life, as ever-present as the serpents in their hands. The Mediterranean of the Bronze Age was far from a barrier. It was a highway, and the Minoans were its most skilled navigators. From the shores of Crete, their ships fanned out in every direction, carrying not just goods, but ideas, artistry, and innovations that would ripple across the ancient world. Imagine a merchant vessel laden with saffron-stained textiles, jars of prized olive oil, and exquisitely crafted pottery, docking at distant ports where traders bartered for Egyptian gold, Anatolian silver, and Lebanese cedar. This wasn't mere commerce, it was the lifeblood of Minoan civilization, a web of connections that stretched from the Nile Delta to the islands of the Aegean and beyond. The scale of their trade is staggering. Archaeologists have traced Minoan pottery, distinctive for its swirling marine motifs and vibrant colors, to sites as far-flung as Cyprus, the Levant, and even Sardinia. In Egypt, frescoes at Avaris depict Minoan envoys bearing gifts, their flowing kilts and curled hair rendered in meticulous detail by Egyptian artists. These weren't isolated encounters. Inscriptions in pharaonic tombs reference Keftiu, likely the Egyptian name for Crete, describing it as a land of unparalleled craftsmanship and wealth. Meanwhile, in the Near East, cuneiform tablets from Mari mention shipments of Cretan wool and perfumed oils, suggesting trade routes so established they required bureaucratic oversight. What made the Minoans such dominant traders? Their ships held the key. Unlike the bulky vessels of their contemporaries, Minoan galleys were sleek and agile, propelled by both sails and oars. Frescoes from Akrotiri show these ships with towering masts and curved hulls, designed to weather the open sea rather than hug coastlines. This technological edge allowed them to traverse longer distances faster, turning Crete into a hub where goods and cultures converged. But trade wasn't just about economics, it was diplomacy. The Minoans seem to have avoided the militaristic posturing of other Bronze Age powers. Instead of conquest, they relied on what scholars call prestige exchange, gifting luxury items to foreign elites to forge alliances. A single gold cup or intricately carved seal could solidify relationships far more effectively than a battalion of soldiers. This strategy left behind a telling absence. While Egyptian tombs brim with weapons and boasts of military victories, Minoan art celebrates processions, feasts, and the act of giving. The commodities they traded reveal their priorities. Olive oil, stored in massive pithoi jars, was likely their most lucrative export, fueling lamps, perfumes, and diets across the Mediterranean. Saffron, harvested from crocuses and used as both dye and medicine, appears in their art and may have been a state-controlled monopoly. Then there's the mysterious Minoan blue, a vivid pigment found in frescoes from Egypt to Mycenae, its recipe possibly a guarded secret. Yet the most fascinating aspect of their trade might be the intangibles they transported. Minoan artistic styles, fluid lines, naturalistic motifs appear in Egyptian murals and Cycladic pottery, hinting at a cultural influence that outlasted their political power. Their architectural innovations like light wells and multi-story complexes inspired Mycenaean palaces. Even their writing systems may have influenced early Greek scripts. The decline of these networks mirrors the civilization's enigmatic fall. After the Thera eruption, Egyptian records cease mentioning Keftiu. Mycenaean Greeks, once middlemen in Minoan trade, began bypassing Crete entirely, dealing directly with the East. The sea roads that had fueled Crete's golden age grew quieter until even the memory of who built them faded into legend. Today, the remnants of these connections lie buried in harbor sediments and foreign tombs, a silent testament to a civilization that saw the Mediterranean not as a boundary but as a bridge. In their world, distance was no obstacle to exchange, and every ship carried not just cargo, but the seeds of a shared cultural language. That legacy, written not in words but in artifacts scattered across 3 continents, may be the Minoans' most enduring mystery of all. The Minoans didn't so much fall as they faded like a fresco exposed to centuries of sunlight, their brilliance dimming layer by layer until only traces remained. What could have brought down a civilization so advanced, so deeply woven into the fabric of the Mediterranean? The answers, like the ruins they left behind, are fragmentary and hotly debated. One of the most dramatic theories points to nature's fury. The eruption of Thera, as we've explored, wasn't just a local disaster, it was a tectonic scream felt across the region. But while the initial blast may have spared Knossos, the aftermath would have been relentless. Imagine tsunamis scouring coastal settlements, ash clouds choking crops, and a volcanic winter disrupting trade routes for years. At Palecastro, archaeologists found evidence of hurried repairs after tsunami damage, proof the Minoans tried to rebuild. Yet resilience has its limits. A civilization dependent on maritime trade would have crumbled if ports were destroyed and ships couldn't sail. The economic collapse might have been slower than the eruption itself, a slow unraveling of the networks that sustained their golden age. Then there's the shadow of the Mycenaeans. These warlike Greeks from the mainland had long been influenced by Minoan culture, adopting their art styles and even their Linear B script. But around 1450 BCE, something shifted. Palaces on Crete show signs of violent destruction, burned walls, shattered pottery, coinciding with the rise of Mycenaean strongholds on the island. At Knossos, Linear B tablets suddenly record military expenditures, a stark departure from Minoan administrative records. Could the Mycenaeans have staged a takeover, exploiting Crete's post-eruption vulnerability? Some scholars argue it wasn't outright invasion but a gradual infiltration, with Mycenaean elites marrying into Minoan ruling families, their influence spreading like ink in water until the culture transformed beyond recognition. But disasters rarely have a single author. Another possibility lurks in the soil samples: climate change. Tree rings from that era reveal prolonged droughts, while sediment cores show shifts in rainfall patterns. For an agrarian society, even a few bad harvests could trigger famine, unrest, or desperate migrations. Add to that the strain of rebuilding after Thera, and the Minoans may have faced a cascade of crises: ecological, economic, and political, each amplifying the next. Perhaps the most haunting theory is that the Minoans sowed the seeds of their own decline. Their palaces, with their open designs and lack of fortifications, suggest a society unaccustomed to threats. When the Mycenaeans arrived with their bronze armor and battle-hardened tactics, the Minoans may have been tragically unprepared. Or consider their reliance on centralized authority. If the priesthood or monarchy lost credibility after failing to prevent disaster, societal trust could have collapsed like an undermined foundation. The truth likely lies in the interplay of all these factors. The Minoans didn't vanish overnight but dissolved into the cultural currents of the Bronze Age, their innovations absorbed by others even as their identity blurred. By the time the Iron Age dawned, their language was forgotten, their palaces abandoned to the elements, yet their legacy persisted in Mycenaean art, in Greek myths, in the very idea of a labyrinthine world where beauty and mystery walk hand in hand. Their end wasn't an extinction but a metamorphosis, leaving us to wonder, did they fall or did they simply become something else? Beneath the sunlit beauty of Minoan frescoes and the grandeur of their palaces lies a shadowy question that unsettles archaeologists to this day. Did this sophisticated civilization practice human sacrifice? The debate hinges on a handful of chilling discoveries, each open to interpretation, each whispering of rituals that defy our image of the Minoans as peaceful nature worshippers. At the palace of Knossos, Sir Arthur Evans himself uncovered bones in a basement chamber, their placement suggesting a possible ritual killing, but it's the sight of a Nemaspilia that ignites the fiercest arguments. There, in a small temple nestled in Crete's hills, excavators found the skeleton of a young man lying atop an altar, his legs contorted, a bronze blade near his ribs. Beside him, the remains of a woman, perhaps a priestess, clutched a ceremonial vessel, as if caught mid-rite when disaster struck, most haunting of all. The temple walls showed signs of sudden collapse, leading some to theorize that an earthquake interrupted the act, burying participants and victim alike. Skeptics counter that the evidence is circumstantial. The altar could be a burial platform, the blade might have been a grave good. No written records describe sacrificial practices, and no other Minoan site shows such clear-cut signs. Even the Nemaspilia bones lack definitive proof of violent death, no cut marks, no trauma beyond what earthquakes might cause. Could this be a tragic coincidence, a temple collapsing during a funeral rather than a sacrifice? Then there's the grisly find at Fornu Coryphae, where a child's bones were discovered mixed with animal remains in a way that mirrors sacrificial deposits from other Bronze Age cultures. Here, the argument shifts to symbolism. If the Minoans did sacrifice humans, was it during extreme crises, a desperate plea to the gods during famine or eruption, rather than a regular practice? Comparative studies offer mixed clues. Nearby cultures like the Canaanites left explicit accounts of child sacrifice, but the Minoans' closest successors, the Mycenaeans, showed no such traditions. The bull-leaping frescoes add another layer. Some scholars suggest these dangerous rituals could have had fatal outcomes, with failed leaps interpreted as offerings to the gods. Yet this remains speculative. No art depicts deliberate killings, and the famed bull-headed statue from Knossos, once thought to be a Minotaur idol, shows no signs of blood or sacrifice. Perhaps the most measured perspective comes from recent forensic advances. Re-examinations of skeletal remains using modern techniques reveal that while some bones show unusual cuts, they could also align with post-mortem dismemberment for burial, a practice known in other ancient societies. Without indisputable proof, the question lingers: were the Minoans capable of such acts under dire circumstances, or have we projected the fears of later cultures onto their silent ruins? What's undeniable is how this debate reflects our own biases. The romanticized view of the Minoans as a pacifist utopia may be as flawed as assuming all ancient peoples practiced brutal rites. The truth likely lies in between, a complex society where spirituality and survival sometimes collided in ways that seem alien to us now. In the end, the absence of definitive answers serves as a reminder. The Minoans' greatest mystery may be how much of their world remains just beyond our grasp. Of all the artifacts unearthed from the ashes of the Minoan world, none captivates or frustrates scholars quite like the Phaistos Disc. This small, fired clay tablet, no larger than a modern dinner plate, was discovered in 1908 amidst the ruins of the Phaistos Palace, nestled in the fertile plains of southern Crete. At first glance, it might seem unremarkable, until you notice the spiral of 45 distinct symbols stamped into its surface, curling inward like the coils of a serpent. These aren't hand-carved markings, but impressions made with individual seals, making the disc the earliest known example of movable type in human history, predating Gutenberg's printing press by over 3,000 years. The symbols themselves are a gallery of the bizarre. Human figures with feather headdresses march alongside shields, birds in flight, and what might be beehives or tambourines. Some resemble objects found in Minoan art, a ship's hull, a lyre, while others defy interpretation entirely. There are no duplicates among the stamps, suggesting each symbol was crafted uniquely for this purpose. The text spirals inward from the outer edge, divided by etched lines into 61 segments, each containing between 2 and 7 signs. But is it writing? A prayer, an ancient board game, a century of study has yielded no consensus, only theories as varied as the symbols themselves. One school of thought insists it's a form of writing, perhaps a hymn or royal decree rendered in a script otherwise lost to time. The repetition of certain symbol sequences hints at linguistic patterns like syllables or poetic meter. Others argue it's a ceremonial object, its text functioning more like heraldic emblems or a symbolic map. The most tantalizing theory links it to the mythical labyrinth. The spiral could chart a ritual path, each symbol a station in a sacred journey. But without a bilingual inscription or a Rosetta Stone equivalent, every decipherment attempt has crumbled under scrutiny. Even the disc's origins are debated. While found in a Minoan context, some symbols echo Anatolian or Egyptian motifs, raising questions about whether it was an import or a local creation influenced by foreign contact. The clay's composition matches Cretan soil, yet no other examples of this script have surfaced, making it either a one-of-a-kind masterpiece or a tantalizing clue to a broader tradition now erased. Technological advances have only deepened the mystery. High-resolution scans confirm the symbols were pressed into wet clay with precision, ruling out later forgery claims. Yet attempts to decode it using AI pattern recognition have produced contradictory results. Some algorithms detect Proto-Greek elements, others propose links to obscure Anatolian languages. The disc's most stubborn secret may be its purpose. Was it meant to be read at all, or was its power rooted in the act of creation itself, a ritual object whose meaning lay in its making? What's undeniable is its hold on the imagination. Unlike linear A, which hides behind its undeciphered symbols, the Phaistos Disc flaunts its imagery while refusing to yield its message. It's as if the Minoans left behind a final joke, an artifact that invites interpretation while eluding every attempt. Perhaps that was the point. In a civilization where bulls danced and goddesses wielded snakes, maybe some mysteries weren't meant to be solved, only marveled at. For now, the disc sits in Herakleon's archaeological museum, its spiral silently mocking anyone who dares to claim they've cracked its code. And so the question lingers, is it a message from the past or merely the echo of one, a whisper we'll never quite catch? The Minoans didn't build temples to towering gods or carve commandments into stone. Instead, their sacred spaces were caves dripping with stalactites, mountaintops brushed by clouds, and the very courtyards where bulls danced. This was a spirituality woven into the natural world, where every spring, tree, and storm might hold divine presence. But was their religion a form of nature worship, a structured polytheistic pantheon, or something in between? The answer lies in the places they revered and the symbols they left behind. Take the caves of Crete, like the famous Sycro cave in the Lassithi Plateau. Here, archaeologists uncovered altars piled with offerings, double-headed axes, ceramic figurines, and precious jewelry, all placed carefully in the damp darkness. For the Minoans, caves weren't just shelters, they were liminal spaces, gateways to the underworld where Earth's energies converged. The same reverence extended to peaks like Mount Juctas, where a sanctuary overlooked the plain of Knossos. Fresco fragments found there depict scenes of epiphany gods or priests appearing amidst sacred trees, their bodies merging with the landscape, yet nature wasn't the sole focus. The Minoans also venerated anthropomorphic deities, albeit with characteristics that blurred the line between human and elemental. The most striking example is their goddess figures, often shown with snakes coiling around their arms or birds perched on their crowns. These weren't distant Olympians ruling from the sky, but immanent forces. A gold ring from Isopota portrays a goddess descending amidst floating daffodils, her outstretched arms summoning worshippers into a dance. Another seal depicts a female figure standing atop a mountain, flanked by lions, as if commanding the wilderness itself. Comparisons to contemporary religions highlight how unusual this blend was. In Egypt, gods had fixed forms and elaborate mythologies recorded in texts. Mesopotamian deities governed specific domains like war or wisdom, but Minoan divinities resist such neat categorization. Their horns of consecration, ubiquitous in sanctuaries, could symbolize bulls, the crescent moon, or even mountain peaks, reflecting a fluidity between the divine and the natural world. Rituals further complicate the picture. At Koto Simi, a remote mountain shrine, fresco fragments show young men offering jugs to a male god beneath a tree, a scene echoing later Greek myths of Zeus Kouros. Yet nearby, clay models of animals and plants suggest offerings for fertility or harvests. The absence of grand statues or monumental temples hints that worship was participatory, tied to cycles of planting and seasons rather than codified theology. The most compelling evidence might be what's missing. Unlike their neighbors, the Minoans left no lists of gods, no creation myths, no prayers inscribed on walls. Their religion thrived in gesture and symbol: the pouring of libations, the leaping over bulls, the weaving of floral garlands. This absence of dogma makes their spirituality both elusive and intimate, a reminder that the sacred could reside in the flight of a bird or the ripple of a wave. Perhaps the closest parallel isn't ancient at all, but indigenous traditions that see divinity in landscapes. Like the Maori's connection to rivers or the Navajo's sacred mountains, the Minoans may have perceived the earth not as a realm to dominate, but as a living communion. Whether we call this nature worship or polytheism matters less than recognizing its power, a spirituality where heaven wasn't above, but everywhere. Dolphins leap across Minoan frescoes in arcs of cobalt and gold, their sleek bodies frozen mid-motion as if swimming through time itself. These weren't just decorative motifs, they were sacred messengers bridging the human world and the mysteries of the deep. Nowhere is this more striking than in the famed dolphin fresco from the Queen's Megaron at Knossos, where the marine mammals glide alongside fish above undulating waves, their forms so lifelike you can almost hear their clicks echoing through the painted corridors. Why did dolphins hold such prominence in Minoan culture? One answer lies in their geography. As islanders, the Minoans lived by the sea's rhythms, relying on its bounty and respecting its dangers. Dolphins, with their playful nature and tendency to follow ships, may have been seen as protective guides, divine escorts ensuring safe passage for fishermen and traders. A seal stone from Malia shows a dolphin flanking a boat, its presence almost heraldic, as if blessing the vessel's journey, but the connection runs deeper than practicality. In Minoan art, dolphins often appear alongside goddess figures or in ritual scenes. A gold ring from Mochlos depicts a female deity standing on a ship with dolphins leaping beside her, suggesting these creatures were more than animals. They were intermediaries between mortals and the divine. The famous Sanctuary of the Dolphins at Philokopi on Milos, though outside Crete, further underscores this spiritual link, its walls adorned with dolphin motifs in a space clearly dedicated to worship. The symbolism here is multi-layered. Dolphins' intelligence and social bonds might have mirrored Minoan values of community and cooperation. Their ability to navigate both air and water could have represented the liminal spaces the Minoans revered. thresholds between worlds where communication with the divine was possible. Even their playful breaches above the waves might have symbolized resurrection or renewal, themes central to agrarian societies dependent on cyclical rebirth. Consider the contrast with contemporary cultures. Egyptians associated dolphins with the goddess Isis but rarely featured them prominently in art. Mycenaeans later appropriated Minoan dolphin imagery but stripped it of its sacred context, turning the creatures into mere decorative elements. Only the Minoans granted them such reverence, weaving them into frescoes, jewelry, and even architectural details like the dolphin-shaped stone spouts found in palace drainage systems. Yet the most tantalizing clue comes from modern marine biology. Research shows that wild dolphins in the Aegean still follow traditional fishing routes the Minoans likely used. Could ancient mariners have developed a symbiotic relationship with these animals, interpreting their presence as a sign of fish-rich waters or impending storms? Some scholars speculate that Minoan priests may have even incorporated dolphin sightings into divination practices, reading their movements like omens. What's striking is how this reverence abruptly disappears after the Minoan collapse. Later Greek art reduces dolphins to mythic accessories, ridden by Eros or entangled in Poseidon's tales. The Minoan vision of dolphins as living threads connecting humanity to the sea's mysteries faded like paint exposed to centuries of light. Today, when we stand before those ancient frescoes, we're not just seeing marine life rendered with startling accuracy. We're glimpsing a worldview where nature wasn't separate from the sacred but inseparable from it. The dolphins of Knossos don't just swim through water, they swim through time, carrying whispers of a civilization that saw the divine in every cresting wave. Beyond the grand palace of Knossos, the Minoans built a network of settlements across Crete, each with its own mysteries whispering through the ruins. Take Phaistos, perched on a hill overlooking the fertile Messara plain. While Knossos dazzles with its labyrinthine corridors, Phaistos intrigues with its audacious architecture. The palace here cascades down the hillside in dramatic terraces, its central courtyard positioned to frame the sacred peak of Mount Ida. But what really sets Phaistos apart are its ritual spaces. A raised, theatral area with stone steps suggests public ceremonies, while underground crypts lined with pier and partition walls hint at secret initiation rites. And then there's the infamous Phaistos Disc, discovered here in a temple storeroom, its spiraling symbols still defying translation after over a century of study. Why would such a unique artifact surface only at Phaistos? Some speculate this was a center for religious innovation, where priests experimented with new forms of sacred expression. Then there's Malia, just along Crete's northern coast. Unlike the ceremonial grandeur of Knossos or Phaistos, Malia feels like a window into everyday Minoan life. Its palace lacks the sprawling complexity of Knossos but reveals something just as precious: an industrial hub where craftsmen produced extraordinary goods. Workshops here yielded everything from delicate gold jewelry to stone vases so thin they're translucent against light. Most telling is the hypostyle hall, a pillared space lined with storage pits that may have served as a communal marketplace. Archaeologists found seashells from as far as the Red Sea here, proving Malia's traders connected Crete to distant networks. But beneath the commerce lay darker secrets. The discovery of a young woman's skeleton in a palace annex surrounded by ritual vessels raises haunting questions about Malia's spiritual undercurrents. Venture further east to Zakros, nestled in a secluded bay, and you'll find a palace that thrived on isolation. Unlike other Minoan centers, Zakros shows no signs of fortifications, just an open embrace of the sea. Its Hall of the Cistern, with a sunken pool fed by freshwater springs, suggests rituals involving sacred waters. Dozens of imported elephant tusks found in storerooms testify to its role as a gateway for exotic materials from Africa and Asia. Yet Zakros met a particularly violent end. Ash layers and collapsed walls point to a sudden catastrophe. possibly linked to the Thera eruption. These satellite settlements reveal a civilization far more diverse than the Knossos-centric narrative suggests. At Gurnia, a compact town, rather than a palace, narrow streets wind past multi-story houses with intact staircases, offering rare glimpses of middle-class Minoan life. Thera, a tiny islet off Crete's coast, specialized in purple dye production, its workshops still stained with crushed murex shells. Each site adds another brushstroke to the portrait. Phaistos the ritual innovator, Malia the artisan's haven, Zakros the cosmopolitan trader. Together, they prove the Minoans weren't a monolithic culture but a mosaic of regional identities, united by shared symbols yet free to evolve distinct flavors. The real revelation: these lesser-known sites often survived Knossos' decline. While the grand palaces collapsed around 1400 BCE, towns like Gurnia persisted for generations, adapting Mycenaean influences while keeping Minoan traditions alive. Their resilience hints at a decentralized power structure, perhaps explaining why the Minoan legacy endured even as their central authority crumbled. To walk these ruins is to understand that Knossos was never the whole story, just the loudest chapter in a saga written across Crete's hills and harbors. The full truth of the Minoans lies scattered in these quiet places, waiting in the pottery shards and half-buried walls for those willing to look beyond the labyrinth. The myths of ancient Greece didn't emerge in a vacuum. They were woven from older threads, and some of the most vibrant strands lead back to the Minoans. Take the story of Theseus and the Minotaur, a tale that has all the hallmarks of a distorted memory. The labyrinth, the monstrous half-bull creature, the tribute of Athenian youths, these elements align eerily with what we know of Minoan Crete. The sprawling palace of Knossos, with its maze-like corridors, could easily have inspired the labyrinth myth, but the connections run deeper than architecture. Bulls were central to Minoan religion, their horns adorning altars and their power channeled in dangerous ceremonial sports. Could the Minotaur be a Greek reinterpretation of these rituals, transforming sacred bull leaping into a monster in a maze? Then there's the figure of Ariadne, the princess who guides Theseus with her magical thread. Minoan frescoes show women in positions of authority, priestesses holding snakes, figures presiding over ceremonies. If Minoan society granted women prominent religious roles, might Ariadne's character preserve a whisper of these real priestess queens? The myth even hints at political undertones. Theseus's slaying of the Minotaur and escape from Crete mirrors the historical decline of Minoan power and the rise of Mycenaean Greece. What was once a cultural takeover may have been recast as a heroic conquest. But the influence doesn't stop there. Daedalus, the legendary craftsman who built the labyrinth, shares traits with Minoan engineers. The sophisticated plumbing systems of Knossos, the intricate fresco techniques, even the lost wax method of metalworking, all suggest a society of master artisans whose skills seemed almost supernatural to later Greeks. Daedalus's flight from Crete with wings of wax and feathers might symbolize the spread of Minoan technology across the Aegean, his fall a warning about the dangers of overreaching. Even Zeus's origin story takes on new meaning in this light. The cave of Psychro in Crete, filled with Minoan offerings, is traditionally identified as the site where Re hid the infant Zeus from Cronus. Could this be a later Greek appropriation of an older Minoan sacred site, folding local Cretan worship into their own pantheon? The pieces fit a pattern. Greek myths often repurpose Minoan symbols, transforming them to fit new narratives while preserving their core power. The most provocative parallel lies in the Atlantis legend. Plato's description of a sophisticated island kingdom swallowed by the sea shares uncanny details with Thera's eruption and the Minoan collapse. Circular harbor cities, advanced engineering, sudden destruction. The similarities are too striking to dismiss entirely. While Atlantis remains myth, the echoes suggest that the Minoan catastrophe left such an impression that its memory morphed into fable over centuries. What emerges is a dialogue across time where Minoan realities became Greek metaphors. Their bull-leaping rites birthed the Minotaur, their priestesses inspired Ariadne, their drowned islands may have seeded Atlantis. The Greeks didn't just inherit Minoan art and architecture, they inherited their mysteries, reshaping them into stories we're still deciphering today. In this way, the Minoans never truly vanished. They simply stepped into the realm of legend, their truths waiting to be unraveled like Ariadne's thread. The notion of the Minoan peace has long captivated historians, painting Crete's ancient civilization as an idyllic exception in a Bronze Age world rife with warfare. Unlike their contemporaries, the battle-scarred Mycenaeans with their fortified citadels, or the Egyptians boasting of smiting enemies, the Minoans left behind frescoes of dolphins leaping and priestesses presiding over ceremonies, not chariots charging or kings trampling foes. But was this really a society free from conflict, or have we romanticized their legacy? The answer, like so much about the Minoans, is tangled in layers of interpretation. On one side, the evidence for peace seems compelling. Knossos and other palaces conspicuously lack the massive defensive walls seen at Mycenae or Turin's. Their art glorifies nature and ritual, not conquest. No scenes of sacked cities or bound prisoners grace their pottery. Even their architecture feels open and inviting, with grand courtyards designed for gatherings rather than repelling invaders. Archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, who first excavated Knossos, championed this view, envisioning the Minoans as a gentle thalassocracy, ruling through trade and cultural influence rather than force. Modern scholars point to their far-flung trade networks as further proof. You don't maintain commerce across the Mediterranean without stability, and the absence of weapons in early Minoan tombs suggests elites didn't define status through martial prowess. Yet scratch beneath the surface and contradictions emerge. Later Minoan settlements like Gurnia and Palicastro reveal something startling: hidden strongholds with guard towers and narrow, easily defensible streets. At Monastiraki, storerooms held not just oil and grain but caches of bronze spearheads and daggers. Even Knossos, for all its airy design, had strategic choke points where a few defenders could hold off attackers. Then there's the Linear B tablets from the palace's final years, listing armor, chariots, and rowers, hardly the inventory of a pacifist utopia. The shift may reflect a darker turn in Minoan history. Early layers show little signs of violence, but by the late 15th century BCE, burned buildings and hastily buried bodies appear at multiple sites. At Knossos, a room dubbed the Armory yielded swords of a distinctly Mycenaean style, hinting at foreign influence or occupation. Some scholars argue this wasn't a sudden transformation but a gradual militarization, possibly triggered by rising threats from the mainland or internal power struggles. The Minoans, it seems, weren't immune to the Bronze Age's tides of violence. They simply delayed the inevitable. But perhaps the dichotomy misses the point. The Minoans may not have been warmongers, but they weren't naive idealists either. Their sea power likely deterred aggression, making massive fortifications unnecessary for centuries. Their art's focus on harmony could reflect a cultural priority, not the absence of conflict, just as modern nations celebrate diplomacy while maintaining armies. Even their weapons, when they appear, are often ornate, ritualistic, like the lion-headed daggers found in rich burials, suggesting ceremonial as much as martial purposes. The truth might lie in the timing. Early Minoan society, cushioned by geographic isolation and naval dominance, may have enjoyed relative peace evidenced by unfortified towns and thriving arts. But as the Mycenaeans grew stronger and Thera's eruption destabilized the region, the rules changed. The later palaces, with their hidden defenses and weapon stockpiles, tell a story of adaptation, not inherent nature. In the end, the Minoan peace may be less a historical fact than a lens distorted by time. We see what survived: the vibrant frescoes, the elegant palaces, while the scars of conflict fade. The Minoans weren't purely peaceful or warlike. They were human, navigating an era where power required both the olive branch and the spear. Their legacy challenges us to abandon simplistic labels and embrace complexity, a civilization as fluid and unpredictable as the sea that cradled it. Beneath the sunlit courtyards and bustling halls of Minoan palaces, another world lurked in shadow. A labyrinth of hidden chambers, secret corridors, and sunken crypts designed to disorient as much as to conceal. At Knossos, behind walls painted with leaping dolphins and saffron gatherers, archaeologists uncovered narrow staircases descending into darkness, their steps worn smooth by generations of unseen footsteps. These weren't mere storage closets or service tunnels. Their placement suggests intentional secrecy, tucked away from public view like the inner workings of a sacred machine. One such space, the temple repositories, hid beneath a central courtyard, accessible only through a twisting passage. Inside, excavators found stacks of ceremonial objects, libation vessels, snake goddess figurines, and tablets inscribed with Linear A, all carefully buried, as if sealed away for protection or some ritual yet unknown to us. Then there's the North Lustral Basin at Knossos, a sunken room with no drainage, its walls lined with benches and traces of charcoal lingering in the air. Unlike the palace's advanced plumbing, this space seems deliberately disconnected from the water system, leading some to speculate it served as a purification chamber or a stage for underworld rituals. The absence of artifacts only deepens the mystery. What happened here? Were initiates led blindfolded through these passages, emerging transformed after nights spent in darkness, or were these spaces used to safeguard treasures during crises? At Phaistos, a concealed staircase winds down to a vaulted room where hoards of seal stones were discovered, each engraved with symbols that may have denoted royal lineage or divine favor. The most tantalizing theory involves sound. Some hidden chambers, like the pillar crypts at Knossos, feature unusual acoustics. Whispers echo unnaturally, and rhythmic noises resonate as if amplified. Experiments suggest drumming or chanting in these spaces could have produced trance-inducing effects, possibly used in rites to commune with deities. It's a haunting thought that these corridors weren't just architectural quirks, but tools to alter consciousness, guiding participants toward visions as they navigated the palace's symbolic underworld. Yet not all secrets were spiritual. At Malia, a narrow tunnel leads from the palace's heart to a discreet side entrance near the harbor. Was this an escape route for elites during uprisings, or a covert passage for controlling trade without scrutiny? The duality is striking. These spaces could serve both the sacred and the strategic, reflecting a civilization as pragmatic as it was mystical. Even the famed lustral basins, once thought to be bathing areas, lacked drainage, suggesting they held liquids temporarily, perhaps offerings poured into the earth or hallucinogenic brews consumed during rites. What's unsettling is how these features vanish after the Mycenaean takeover. Later additions to Knossos walled off hidden passages, filling them with rubble. It's as if the new rulers sought to erase not just Minoan power, but their secrets, the very knowledge that might have made those twisting corridors more than just stone and mortar. Today, standing in these chambers, you're left with an eerie certainty. The Minoans didn't just build palaces, they built puzzles, their true purpose locked away like the symbols on the Phaistos Disc, waiting for a key we've yet to find. Plato's description of Atlantis reads like something torn from a Minoan travelogue, a wealthy island kingdom, advanced beyond its years, suddenly swallowed by the sea in a single cataclysmic day and night. The parallels are tantalizing. Like Atlantis, the Minoans were master navigators, their ships threading the Mediterranean with ease. Their palaces boasted engineering marvels, running water, multi-story complexes, and art that pulsed with life, echoing Plato's claim that Atlantis possessed works of art exceeding ordinary human measure. Even the geography aligns. Thera, the volcanic island at the heart of Minoan trade, fits the rough dimensions Plato gives for Atlantis' central plain, complete with concentric rings of land and water. When Thera erupted, it didn't just vanish, it collapsed inward, leaving a caldera where a bustling harbor once thrived. Could this disaster, echoing across the Aegean for generations, have warped into the legend of a utopia punished by the gods? The argument gains weight when you examine the timeline. Plato sets Atlantis' fall 9,000 years before his own era, an impossibly distant date. But what if the number was mistranscribed or exaggerated? Shift that to 900 years and you land squarely in the late Bronze Age, when Thera's eruption reshaped the Mediterranean. Egyptian priests, whom Plato cites as his source, were notorious for inflating dates to impress foreign visitors. A Minoan delegation to Egypt, boasting of their island's splendor, might have inspired tales later garbled by time. Even the name Atlantis could hint at Crete. The Minoans called their land Keftiu in Egyptian records, while in Berber languages, Atlas signified water. Could Atlantis be a linguistic fossil of these tangled cultural memories? Yet skeptics pounce on the gaps. Plato's Atlantis lies beyond the Pillars of Hercules' modern Gibraltar, while Crete sits firmly in the eastern Mediterranean. The scale is also problematic. Atlantis purportedly ruled over continents, while Minoan influence, though vast, was maritime, not imperial. Worse, Plato explicitly frames Atlantis as a moral allegory, a cautionary tale about hubris. His detailed account of its destruction, earthquakes, floods, and a society decaying from within reads more like philosophical theater than historical reportage. The strongest counterpoint comes from archaeology. If Thera's eruption inspired Atlantis, why don't Egyptian or Minoan records mention it? Thera's blast was colossal, yet Crete's palaces show no evidence of tsunami damage at Knossos, their cultural heart. The Minoans declined gradually, their collapse a mosaic of invasions, trade disruptions, and internal strife, not a single apocalyptic event. Even the concentric city design Plato describes finds no direct parallel in Minoan ruins, though the ring-shaped caldera of Thera might have inspired the motif. Perhaps the truth lies in synthesis. Thera's eruption was a regional trauma, its shockwaves rippling through oral traditions for centuries. By Plato's time, fragments of that catastrophe, mixed with hazy memories of Minoan grandeur and Egyptian moralizing, could have crystallized into the Atlantis myth. The Minoans didn't need to be Atlantis to seed its legend. Their sudden fragility in the face of nature's fury may have embodied a universal lesson about civilization's precariousness. In the end, the connection remains a siren song, alluring but impossible to grasp fully. Like the Minoans themselves, Atlantis straddles the line between history and myth, a caution that even the mightiest kingdoms are but whispers waiting to be drowned by the sea. Above the frescoed halls and labyrinthine corridors of Knossos, the Minoans may have kept their eyes fixed on the heavens. Unlike later Greek astronomers who mapped constellations with mathematical precision, the Minoans' celestial knowledge appears woven into the very fabric of their architecture and rituals. At the palace of Phaistos, a curious stone disc known as the Phaistos star calendar bears markings that some scholars believe track the movements of Venus, a celestial body sacred to many ancient cultures. The disc's spiral of precisely spaced holes aligns with the planet's 8-year cycle, suggesting the Minoans didn't just observe the stars but integrated them into their concept of sacred time. This astronomical awareness reveals itself in unexpected places. The orientation of Minoan palaces wasn't arbitrary. Knossos aligned so precisely with the summer solstice sunrise that on that morning, light would have flooded through specific corridors, illuminating inner sanctuaries like a divine spotlight. At Malia, a unique kernel found in the palace's central court contains carvings that may represent the Pleiades star cluster, whose heliacal rising marked the agricultural calendar across the ancient Mediterranean. Even the famed horns of consecration crowning Minoan shrines could double as lunar symbols, their curved shapes mirroring the crescent moon's phases. Their calendar system presents another puzzle. Unlike the Egyptians' solar-based year or the Babylonians' lunar cycles, the Minoans likely used a lunisolar calendar that reconciled both systems, a sophisticated approach requiring periodic intercalary months to keep seasons aligned. Clay tablets from Knossos list offerings tied to months with names like the sowing and the harvest, suggesting their timekeeping revolved around nature's rhythms rather than abstract numbers. One linear B tablet even details rations for month 20, implying they occasionally added extra months to correct seasonal drift, much like modern leap years. The most tantalizing evidence comes from cave sanctuaries like Scatino, where sunlight penetrates the cavern's mouth only during equinoxes, casting beams onto altars carved with spiral motifs, a potential marriage of astronomy and worship. Similarly, Mount Juctas, the legendary burial place of Zeus, features a peak sanctuary where excavated votive offerings include clay models of animals marked with dots that may represent star patterns. Could this have been an open-air observatory where priests tracked celestial events to predict festivals or planting seasons? What emerges is a civilization that saw time not as a straight line but as a sacred circle, where the movements of stars and planets directly influenced daily life. Their buildings became cosmic clocks, their rituals synchronized with celestial dances, and their art, like the dolphin fresco, with its possible representations of constellations, blurred the boundary between earth and sky. While they left no star charts or written treatises on planetary motion, their legacy lives on in stones aligned to solstices, caves transformed into solar temples, and artifacts whispering of a people who measured their days by the heaven's grand design. The silence of their written records only sharpens the mystery. How much more did they understand about the cosmos than we'll ever truly know? The vibrant frescoes of Minoan Crete burst with surreal imagery, flowers blooming impossibly large, figures floating weightlessly, and animals frozen in ecstatic motion. Some scholars argue these aren't just artistic flourishes but clues to something far more elusive: the use of mind-altering substances in sacred rites. The theory is controversial, yet the evidence scattered across art and archaeology paints a provocative picture of a culture that may have sought communion with the divine through altered states. Take the famous Saffron Gatherer fresco from Akrotiri. A blue monkey, an animal foreign to Crete, reaches for crocus flowers, the source of saffron, a spice long known for its medicinal and psychoactive properties. Ancient texts from Egypt to Mesopotamia describe saffron as a visionary aid, and modern research confirms its compounds can induce mild euphoria. Even more telling are the oversized blossoms dominating the scene, their petals unnaturally elongated as if magnified by perception itself. Could this be artistic license or a depiction of hallucinogenic amplification? Then there's the opium poppy. Terracotta figurines from Gazi and Phaistos show goddesses wearing crowns adorned with what appear to be poppy capsules, their seed heads carefully incised. At the sacred site of Koto-Simi, libation vessels tested positive for opiate residues. This isn't mere speculation. Bronze Age trade records from the Near East confirm opium was a coveted commodity, used both as painkiller and ritual entheogen. The Minoans, master traders, would have had access to these potent imports. The most striking evidence comes from the Hagia Triada sarcophagus, where painted figures wield strange vessels shaped like inverted poppy pods. One priestess pours liquid into an altar while another plays a lyre, her head tilted back in what could be rapture or trance. The scene pulses with ritual energy, and the pod-shaped writer, containers linked to ceremonial drinking, hint at an intoxicating brew. Even the Minoans' ubiquitous Rhyton cups, often shaped like bulls' heads, may have held more than wine. Residues in some suggest mixtures of herbs, honey, and fermented substances. Not all scholars are convinced. Skeptics point out that artistic exaggeration doesn't equal drug use, and that opium's medicinal applications could explain its presence without invoking rituals. The poppy imagery might symbolize sleep or death rather than intoxication, much like later Greek associations with Morpheus, god of dreams, and yet the cross-cultural pattern is hard to ignore. From the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece to the Soma rites of Vedic India, psychoactives were sacred tools worldwide. Why would the Minoans, so attuned to nature's cycles, have been an exception? The architecture itself whispers of altered states. The labyrinthine corridors of Knossos, the flickering torchlight in windowless crypts, the acoustic properties of certain chambers that amplified chanting into reverberating drones, all could have served to disorient and elevate consciousness. Pair this with fasting, rhythmic dancing, and potent brews, and the line between earthly and divine might dissolve entirely. Perhaps the truth lies in the artifacts left behind. A seal stone from Knossos shows a figure with elongated limbs and swirling eyes, their body contorted as if mid-vision. Another depicts a worshipper embracing a tree, its branches twisting like serpents. Are these metaphors or literal glimpses of chemically aided epiphanies? Without written accounts, we're left reading between the brushstrokes, decoding a language of sensation etched in clay and pigment. What's certain is that the Minoans revered altered perception, whether through substances or other means. Their art thrums with energy, their rituals pulsed with theatricality, and their gods seemed to move just beyond the veil of the visible. If they did harness plants to thin that veil, it wasn't escapism, it was archaeology's oldest quest, to touch the untouchable and return with visions worth painting on palace walls. At the heart of Knossos, a small but striking chamber stops visitors in their tracks, a stone seat flanked by frescoed griffins, its walls painted in rich reds and blues. For decades, archaeologists called this the throne room, imagining Minoan rulers holding court here, but step closer and the questions multiply. Why is this space so intimate compared to grand throne rooms in Egypt or Mesopotamia? Why does it sit adjacent to a sunken basin with no apparent drainage, a feature more ritual than regal? The truth may be far stranger than a simple seat of power. One compelling theory reimagines this chamber as a sacred space rather than a political one. The griffins guarding the throne aren't just decorative, they're mythological hybrids, symbols of divine authority in ancient Near Eastern cultures. Fresco fragments from the room show processions of offering bearers, not courtiers or soldiers. Even the throne's placement aligns with an architectural feature found in Minoan peak sanctuaries, a central axis leading to a raised platform where deities or their intermediaries might manifest. Could this have been a site of ritual epiphany where a priestess channeled a goddess while seated beneath those watchful beasts? Modern reconstructions suggest the space's acoustics amplify voices eerily, making whispered words resonate as if spoken from the walls themselves, a detail that feels deliberate, even theatrical. Then there's the curious lustral basin just beyond the throne. Unlike functional Minoan baths, this sunken pool lacks drainage, its steps worn smooth by countless bare feet. Some scholars propose it held libations or purified initiates before ceremonies. Others point to traces of plant residues in similar basins, hinting at psychoactive brews used in rites. Pair this with the throne's low height seated. A person would be at eye level with those standing in the basin, and the dynamic shifts. Rather than a ruler towering over subjects, this arrangement suggests interaction, perhaps even a sacred dialogue between mortal and divine. The counterargument hinges on practicality. Linear B tablets from later Mycenaean occupied Knossos reference a Wanax king administering justice, and the throne's sturdy gypsum construction implies permanence. Yet Minoan art never depicts rulers enthroned. Authority figures appear in processions or rituals, not static poses. Even the room's off-center location, tucked away rather than dominating the palace's layout, hints at a purpose beyond secular rule. Perhaps the most radical reinterpretation comes from archaeologist Nano Marinatos, who suggests the throne wasn't for living royalty at all, but for an effigy of a deity during festivals. In this scenario, the chamber transforms into a stage for sacred theater, where the boundaries between human and divine blurred. The griffins wouldn't guard a king, but symbolize the celestial realm's gaze upon the rituals unfolding below. What's undeniable is how this space distills the Minoan genius for ambiguity. A chair becomes a covenant between earth and sky, a room a crossroads of the seen and unseen. Whether throne room or temple, its power endures not in answering our questions, but in holding them, suspended like the frescoed griffins mid-flight, forever watching, forever silent. Among the vibrant frescoes and delicate artifacts of Minoan Crete, one group often overlooked is the children, yet their presence lingers in unexpected ways. Unlike later Greek societies that idealized youthful perfection in statues of athletic boys, Minoan art captures children with startling naturalism. A fresco from Akrotiri shows a toddler stumbling forward, arms outstretched, his chubby legs slightly unsteady, an intimate snapshot of early steps frozen in plaster. Another fragment depicts a young girl gathering crocuses, her tiny fingers carefully plucking saffron threads alongside women, suggesting even the very young participated in seasonal rituals. These aren't stiff, symbolic representations but lively portraits, hinting at a culture that cherished childhood's fleeting moments. But childhood in Bronze Age Crete wasn't all playful scenes. Archaeological evidence reveals a more complex reality. At the settlement of Gurnia, miniature vessels pitchers no taller than a thumb were found nestled in household shrines. Some scholars believe these were toys, perhaps used in games mimicking adult tasks like pouring libations. Others argue they held ritual significance, tools for children to participate in domestic ceremonies. The distinction between play and sacred practice blurs here, revealing a society where even a child's activities carried layers of meaning. Burial customs offer another perspective. In the cemetery at Armenoi, infants were interred with seashells and clay animals, their graves marked by small stone enclosures. Older children, however, received burials akin to adults' jewelry, seals, even tiny daggers, suggesting rites of passage we can only guess at. One poignant find is a child's skeleton adorned with a gold foil necklace, its delicate loops sized for a neck no thicker than a wrist. Was this a mark of status or a parent's desperate offering to the underworld? The silence of the bones leaves room for both interpretations. The most revealing clues come from artistic depictions of initiation rites. A seal stone from Knossos shows a child standing between two women, one holding a wreath above their head. Another fresco fragment from Thera portrays a line of girls carrying offering baskets, their hair braided identically as if part of a formalized ceremony. These scenes suggest childhood was punctuated by structured transitions, possibly marking stages of education or spiritual preparation, yet not all roles were ceremonial. At Palecastro, archaeologists uncovered tiny fingerprints pressed into unfired pottery, evidence of children apprenticing in workshops. Their contributions weren't marginal. Some vessels bear a child's clumsy shaping repaired by a master's steady hand, a tangible record of intergenerational learning. Even in play, there was purpose. Clay figurines of bulls and boats found in homes might have been toys, but they also familiarized children with the symbols of their culture. The paradox of Minoan childhood lies in this duality: cherished yet practical, sacred yet ordinary. Unlike the rigid training of Spartan youth or the Athenian emphasis on schooling, Minoan children seem to weave seamlessly into the fabric of daily life, their growth nurtured through participation rather than isolation. Whether gathering saffron, shaping clay, or standing wide-eyed in ceremonies, they weren't just preparing for adulthood. They were already integral to the rhythm of their world. In their small fingerprints and frescoed laughter, we glimpse a society that honored the present as much as the future, where every stage of life held its own sacred space. In Minoan Crete, animals weren't just companions or symbols, they were living bridges between the earthly and the divine. Nowhere is this more evident than in their reverence for bulls, creatures so central to their culture that their horns became sacred emblems, towering over altars and palace courtyards. The famous horns of consecration, found at Knossos and other sites, weren't mere decorations. They framed rituals where humans and animals intertwined in acts of worship and spectacle. Bull-leaping frescoes capture this relationship in breathtaking detail, athletes somersaulting over charging beasts, their bodies arching in perfect harmony with the animal's momentum. But this wasn't sport as we understand it today. The sheer danger of the act, the risk of goring or crushing, suggests something deeper, a rite of passage, a test of courage, or perhaps even a symbolic union with the bull's raw, untamed power. Snakes, too, slithered through the spiritual landscape of the Minoans, their sinuous forms coiled around the arms of goddess figurines or depicted in jeweled pendants. Unlike later cultures that feared serpents as tricksters or evil omens, the Minoans seemed to view them as guardians of wisdom and regeneration. The snake goddess statues, with their bare breasts and hypnotic gaze, clutch writhing snakes as if harnessing their energy, a stark contrast to the monstrous Medusa of Greek myth. Some scholars believe these figurines represent priestesses channeling divine power during ceremonies, the snakes acting as living conduits between worlds. Others point to the reptiles' ability to shed their skin, seeing in them symbols of rebirth and cyclical time. Either way, the Minoans' fascination with snakes permeated even their homes. Clay tubes with serpent appliques found in household shrines suggest families kept these creatures close, perhaps as protectors against unseen forces. Then there are the griffins, those majestic hybrids of lion and eagle that adorned palace walls and guarded the so-called throne room at Knossos. Unlike bulls and snakes, which had tangible presence in daily life, griffins were purely mythological, yet the Minoans treated them with equal reverence. Their appearance in art is telling, often flanking goddesses or perched atop altars. They seem to symbolize a celestial authority, bridging the earthly and the divine. A gold ring from Mycenae, likely Minoan in craftsmanship, shows a griffin leading a procession of worshippers, its wings outstretched as if guiding them toward epiphany. The creature's duality, lion's strength paired with eagle's vision, may have embodied the Minoan ideal of balanced power, fierce yet enlightened, grounded yet soaring. Even marine life held sacred significance. Dolphins, vividly rendered in frescoes and jewelry, weren't just charming sea creatures but emissaries from another realm. Their playful leaps mirrored the ecstatic dances of Minoan rituals, their fluid movements echoing the rhythms of a culture deeply attuned to nature's pulse. A seal stone from Malia portrays a dolphin swimming alongside a ship, its presence less decorative than devotional, a plea for safe passage or a nod to the sea's divine mysteries. The Minoans' animal worship wasn't just about adoration, it was a language. Through bulls they spoke of strength and sacrifice, through snakes they whispered of renewal and hidden knowledge. Through griffins and dolphins they reached for realms beyond human grasp. In a world without written scripture, these creatures became their sacred texts, their forms and movements encoding beliefs we're still deciphering. To understand the Minoans is to listen not just to the silence of their ruins, but to the voices of the beasts they cherished, who roared, slithered, and soared through their imaginations like living prayers. The sea wasn't just a boundary for the Minoans, it was their lifeblood, their highway, their identity. Unlike landlocked civilizations that viewed the ocean with awe or fear, the Minoans embraced it with the confidence of those who understood its rhythms intimately. Their ships, sleek and agile, carved through the waves with a grace unmatched in the Bronze Age Mediterranean. Archaeologists studying pottery fragments and frescoes have reconstructed these vessels, long, crescent-shaped hulls with towering masts and banks of oars, their prows often painted with staring eyes to ward off misfortune. These weren't the lumbering cargo ships of later eras but versatile hybrids, equally capable of transporting amphorae of olive oil or outpacing pirates. The secret to their maritime dominance lay in their craftsmanship. Minoan shipbuilders used cypress and cedar, materials prized for their resilience and lightness, fastened with precise mortise and tenon joints that allowed hulls to flex with the waves rather than splinter under pressure. A fresco from Akrotiri on Thera captures these ships in motion, their sails billowing with geometric patterns, their decks crowded with rowers in synchronized rhythm. Unlike Egyptian vessels which clung to riverbanks or Mycenaean boats designed for coastal raids, Minoan galleys were built for open water, their deep keels stabilizing them against the Aegean's unpredictable currents. But their skill extended beyond construction. The Minoans mastered celestial navigation, using the stars to chart courses between Crete and ports as distant as Egypt and Sardinia. Clay tablets from Knossos list harbor names and sailing routes, suggesting an organized network of way stations where crews could replenish supplies. Even their art hints at this expertise. A gold ring from Mochlos shows a ship navigating beneath a crescent moon, its crew seeming to steer by the night sky. The sea's influence seeped into every facet of Minoan life. Their diet, rich in tuna, sea urchins, and shellfish, left behind middens of shells in coastal settlements. Their religion venerated marine deities, with dolphins leaping across frescoes and altars shaped like stylized waves. At Kamos, a sprawling harbor town, archaeologists uncovered a monumental ship shed where vessels could be hauled ashore for repairs, a testament to how deeply maritime logistics were woven into their urban planning. Trade was the engine of their economy, and the sea was its fuel. Minoan merchants didn't just transport goods, they traded in ideas, technologies, and artistic styles. A single voyage could bring Egyptian gold to Crete, Cretan pottery to the Cyclades, and Cycladic obsidian to Anatolia. The sheer variety of foreign artifacts found in Minoan palaces, ivory from Syria, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, amber from the Baltic, speaks to a commercial reach that dwarfed their island size. Yet this reliance on the sea also held vulnerability. When Thera erupted, the tsunamis that ravaged Crete's northern coast didn't just destroy ports, they severed the lifelines of a thalassocracy. Trade routes faltered, and with them, the flow of wealth and prestige that had sustained Minoan elites. Later, as Mycenaean warlords turned the Aegean into a battleground, the Minoans' open, unfortified harbors became liabilities rather than assets. What lingers is the paradox of their maritime legacy. The same sea that nurtured their brilliance ultimately amplified their downfall, carrying invaders to their shores and dispersing their culture even as it faded. But in their golden age, the Minoans achieved something extraordinary. They didn't just sail the Mediterranean, they tamed it, turning its vastness into a connective web that bound together the ancient world's farthest corners. Their ships weren't merely vessels, they were the threads of a civilization that dared to see the ocean not as a barrier but as a boundless horizon. Burial chambers across Crete hold silent testimony to how the Minoans grappled with life's greatest mystery, what comes after. Unlike the grand pyramids of Egypt or the warrior tombs of Mycenae, Minoan graves whisper their secrets through subtle details. The positioning of a skeleton, the choice of grave goods, the layers of offerings left over centuries. At the cemetery of Armenoi near Rethymno, over 200 rock-cut tombs honeycomb the hillside, each revealing a unique approach to honoring the dead. Some chambers held single occupants curled on their sides like sleepers, while others housed generations of families, their bones carefully gathered and stacked after decomposition, evidence of an ongoing relationship between the living and the departed. The objects buried with the dead tell their own story. High-status tombs contain delicate gold diadems, polished stone seals, and bronze mirrors, tools for both adornment and identity in the afterlife. But it's the humbler offerings that intrigue archaeologists most. Clay jugs still stained with wine residue, seashells from distant shores, and tiny figurines of animals suggest beliefs where the afterlife mirrored earthly existence. A child's grave at Gurnia held a miniature boat, perhaps a vessel for the soul's journey, while a warrior's tomb at Malia included a dagger deliberately bent, a symbolic killing of the weapon to accompany its owner spiritually rather than functionally. Most revealing are the burial sites locations. Early Minoans interred their dead in caves like those at Matala, where the natural rock formations may have symbolized wombs for rebirth. Later, Tholos tombs, beehive-shaped structures with vaulted roofs, dotted the landscape, their circular designs possibly echoing the cyclical view of existence seen in Minoan art. At Phaoni, a cemetery used for over 1,000 years, tomb entrances consistently face east, aligning with the rising sun's promise of renewal. Even in death, the Minoans seem to choreograph their ceremonies with celestial precision. Rituals extended far beyond the grave. Excavations at Knossos uncovered kernoi, circular vessels with cup-like depressions used to pour libations for the dead. Fresco fragments show processions carrying offerings to tomb entrances, suggesting regular feasts where the living communed with ancestors, a tradition echoing modern Greek Mnemosyna ceremonies. Some tombs feature intricate drainage systems, hinting at liquid offerings channeled symbolically into the earth. The most poignant evidence comes from charred animal bones found near burial sites, remnants of funeral feasts where families shared meals with the departed, blurring the line between this world and the next. What did the Minoans believe awaited their loved ones? Unlike the Greeks' gloomy Hades or the Egyptians' elaborate Book of the Dead, Minoan cosmology leaves no written explanations. Yet art provides tantalizing clues. A gold ring from Mycenae, likely of Minoan craftsmanship, depicts a goddess guiding a tiny floating figure toward a tree flanked by celestial bodies. Another seal shows a boat packed with souls, steered by a bird-headed figure toward a starry horizon. The recurring motifs of trees, boats, and celestial symbols suggest a worldview where death wasn't an end, but a voyage to a luminous otherworld mirrored in nature's cycles. The greatest mystery lies in what changed. Early Minoan burials show egalitarian simplicity, while later tombs reflect stark hierarchies, some lavishly furnished, others bare. At Sissi, a tomb from Crete's decline held a skeleton with a crushed skull, surrounded by shattered pottery, whispering of violence or desecration. Whether through foreign influence or internal upheaval, the Minoans' peaceful relationship with their dead fractured alongside their civilization. In the end, their burial practices reveal a people deeply attuned to life's ephemeral beauty. From the seashell in a child's hand to the ancestors revisited season after season, they crafted a dialogue with death that was intimate rather than fearful, a reminder that even in silence the dead have stories to tell. Even after more than a century of excavations and research, the Minoans guard their most profound secrets with stubborn silence. One of the most tantalizing enigmas lies in their language. Linear remains undeciphered, locking away everything from royal decrees to personal letters. Recent efforts using artificial intelligence to analyze symbol patterns have produced tantalizing hints of grammatical structures, but without a bilingual inscription like the Rosetta Stone, the script continues to defy translation. Equally puzzling is the Phaistos Disc, its spiral of stamped symbols standing alone in the archaeological record. No other artifact like it has ever been found, leaving scholars to wonder, was this a sacred hymn, a diplomatic message, or something more esoteric? The true nature of Minoan governance also eludes us. Unlike contemporary civilizations with clear royal iconography, Crete's palaces lack grand statues of kings. The famous Prince of the Lilies fresco, once thought to depict a ruler, may actually show a priestess or deity. Recent excavations at Zaminthos, a mountainous settlement, revealed a complex that may have been an administrative outpost rather than a religious site, suggesting a sophisticated bureaucracy. Yet without written records, we can't say whether the Minoans were ruled by priest kings, merchant oligarchs, or some hybrid system unique in the ancient world. Archaeology continues to unveil surprises that rewrite what we thought we knew. In 2021, laser scans of a previously overlooked hilltop near Kasseli revealed the outlines of an enormous structure, possibly a palace rivaling Knossos in scale. Meanwhile, underwater surveys off the coast of Thera have uncovered submerged Minoan buildings, their walls preserved by the sea, offering unprecedented insights into coastal settlements lost to rising waters. Perhaps most remarkably, DNA analysis of bones at Armenoi Cemetery has traced genetic connections stretching from Sardinia to the Levant, proving the Minoans were far more interconnected than previously imagined. The civilization's sudden decline remains hotly debated. While the eruption of Thera was once blamed for their collapse, newer evidence paints a more complex picture. Tree ring data shows severe droughts in the eastern Mediterranean around 1400 BCE, while sediment cores from Knossos reveal layers of wildfire ash, signs of ecological stress that may have weakened the society before Mycenaean invasions finished it. A discovery at Chania of hastily buried bronze hoards suggests some Minoans anticipated upheaval, hiding valuables they never returned to reclaim. Modern technology is peeling back layers of mystery in unexpected ways. Multispectral imaging has revealed faded frescoes invisible to the naked eye, including one at Akrotiri showing two women in what appears to be a ceremonial duel. Isotope analysis of pottery has traced olive oil exports as far as Britain, while 3D reconstructions of palace architecture suggest certain corridors were designed to amplify specific frequencies, perhaps for acoustic rituals. Each breakthrough, however, births new questions. The greatest revelation may be how much we still don't understand. From their spiritual beliefs to their daily lives, the Minoans refuse to fit neatly into our historical frameworks. Their art pulses with life, their architecture dazzles with innovation, yet their voices remain just out of earshot. Perhaps that's why they captivate us, not despite the mysteries, but because of them. In a world where so much ancient history feels catalogued and settled, the Minoans persist as a reminder that the past still holds stories waiting to be told. From the labyrinthine halls of Knossos to the undeciphered whispers of Linear A, from the bull-leaping frescoes to the sacred caves echoing with forgotten rituals, we've journeyed through 30 of the most captivating mysteries of the Minoan civilization. We've marveled at their advanced plumbing systems, debated the meaning behind the Phaistos Disc's cryptic symbols, and pondered whether their sudden collapse was wrought by volcanic fury, Mycenaean blades, or something far more subtle. We've seen how women wielded serpents and authority with equal grace, how dolphins leapt not just through waves but through the boundaries between the mundane and the divine, and how their art pulsed with a vitality that feels startlingly modern even after 3,000 years. What makes the Minoans so endlessly fascinating isn't just what we've discovered, it's what remains tantalizingly out of reach. They're a paradox, a civilization both vividly present and hauntingly absent, their innovations matched only by their mysteries. Their palaces stand as monuments to human ingenuity, yet their voices are silent, their stories fragmented. Were they the peaceful traders of legend, or did their rituals harbor darker truths? Did they inspire the myth of Atlantis, or did their fate become a cautionary tale rewritten by time? Every answer we uncover seems to birth three new questions, and that's the magic of archaeology at its best. The past isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation that never truly ends. So now we turn to you. What secrets of the Minoans captivate you most? Do you see their bull leaping as sacred theater or deadly sport? Could the Phaistos Disc ever be decoded, or is its mystery part of its power? Share your theories, your questions, even your wildest speculations in the comments below. History isn't just about facts in textbooks, it's a living dialogue, and your voice belongs in it. As the sun sets over Crete's rugged hills, casting long shadows across the ruins of Knossos, the Minoans remind us that some stories refuse to be confined to the past. They linger in the artistry of a fresco, the curve of a clay vessel, the echo of a name we'll never truly know. Their legacy isn't just in what they built, but in the questions they left behind, invitations to keep exploring, keep wondering, keep reaching across the centuries. The labyrinth isn't empty, it's waiting, and who knows, the next great discovery might be just a shovel's depth away.